Around 9600 BCE, hunter-gatherers with no metal tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no draft animals quarried and raised limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons on a hilltop in what is now southeastern Turkey. The construction ran for approximately 1,500 years. Then, around 8000 BCE, the same population that built it packed every enclosure full of millions of pieces of rubble, animal bones, and broken stone tools, material hauled in from elsewhere because this site sits on an exposed hilltop where sediment does not accumulate on its own. The German archaeologist who excavated it for 20 years called the burial intentional in peer-reviewed publications. That conclusion has been in the literature since the 1990s. A formal, agreed explanation for why the burial happened has not been reached in 30 years of excavation since. That is where this investigation starts. This is the Erased Archive. Every video investigates a physical discovery the institutional record has measured, documented, and then stopped asking questions about. Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill in Turkish. For centuries, locals treated it as old ground, a place where carved flint tools and shaped stones occasionally surfaced when the soil was plowed. In the 1960s, a joint survey team from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University recorded the limestone slabs visible on the surface and classified the site as the probable remains of an abandoned Byzantine cemetery. Standard procedure. The survey moved on. The hill held its position for another 30 years. In 1994, a farmer named Savak Yildiz was plowing his field on the same hill when his plow caught on something large below the surface. He dug down and found the top of a massive T-shaped limestone pillar. He reported it to the Sanliurfa Museum, and word reached Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist with the German Archaeological Institute, then excavating a related Neolithic site nearby called Navali Quarry, where smaller T-shaped pillars had already been found. Schmidt traveled to Potbelly Hill in late 1994. He later described his first few seconds at the site. Within a minute of seeing the pillar tops emerging from the ground, he said he knew he had two choices: go away and tell nobody, or spend the rest of his life working here. He chose to stay. Full excavations began in 1995. What his team found was not a cemetery. It was a ceremonial complex. Here is where it gets strange. Schmidt's team uncovered a series of large, roughly circular enclosures, each defined by a ring of T-shaped limestone pillars set into stone walls, with two larger central pillars facing each other at the focal point of each structure. Radiocarbon dating results published in 2013 by Dietrich, Hahn, Notroff, Schmidt, and Zarnkow in the journal Quaternary International placed the earliest construction phases at approximately 9600 BCE. Multiple independent radiocarbon samples from different excavation contexts confirmed the date. 9600 BCE is 6,500 years before the first stones were raised at Stonehenge. It is 7,500 years before the Great Pyramid at Giza. The builders had no metal tools, only flint, bone, and wood. They had no wheeled transport and no domesticated draft animals. By every formal definition in the archaeological literature at the time, they were hunter-gatherers, mobile, without permanent settlements, subsisting on hunting and foraging. This is the population the peer-reviewed radiocarbon data places at the center of a multi-enclosure ceremonial complex, with pillars weighing up to 20 tons, active for 15 centuries. The quarry sites have been identified approximately 400 meters from the hilltop. One quarry still contains an unfinished pillar attached to the bedrock. It is over 7 meters long and would have weighed approximately 50 tons if completed, abandoned mid-extraction. A permanent record of the scale of the operation. The completed pillars in the enclosures weigh up to 20 tons each. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that moving multi-ton stone blocks with rope, levers, and coordinated labor is physically possible. What the peer-reviewed literature has not formally modeled is the sustained organizational infrastructure that would be required to maintain this operation: quarrying, transport, construction, and maintenance across 1,500 years and a minimum of 20 separate enclosures. To be precise about what that means, the experimental literature does not say the construction was impossible. It says the construction required a level of sustained social organization, planners, specialists, a long-term labor force, and a logistics system capable of feeding that force across multiple construction seasons, that the standard model for pre-agricultural societies did not accommodate before Göbekli Tepe was dated. The site did not fit the model. The model has been under revision since 1995. The gap between what has been experimentally demonstrated and what the site physically required has not been formally closed in the published record. That is problem one. The physical record inside the enclosures contains a second layer. The T-pillars are not undecorated slabs. Klaus Schmidt published analysis in multiple papers arguing that the T-shaped design represents a stylized human figure in profile, with the crossbar as a head and the shaft as the body. Several pillars carry carved arms wrapping around the shaft, with hands and fingers meeting above a carved belt. They are anthropomorphic. They are standing stone figures, each cut from a single block of limestone, arranged in rings around two larger central figures in each enclosure. The relief carvings covering the pillar surfaces document a specific symbolic vocabulary. The catalog is dominated by predatory animals: snakes, foxes, boars, scorpions, vultures. Gentle or domesticated animals are largely absent. There is no landscape, no vegetation, no sun, no moon. It is not a picture of the environment. It is a code. In 2017, a peer-reviewed paper published in Science Advances by Greske, Helm, and Clare at the German Archaeological Institute, titled "Modified Human Crania from Göbekli Tepe Provide Evidence for a New Form of Neolithic Skull Cult," formally documented something that had not been cataloged before. 3 human skull fragments recovered from the fill deposits showed deliberate post-mortem modification, careful incisions, a carved longitudinal groove, evidence of suspension holes. This was not accidental damage. It was intentional processing of human remains after death. The paper categorized it as an undocumented variation of skull cult. The skull fragments are in the physical record. The full ritual context has not been formally resolved. Pillar 43, the vulture stone in Enclosure D, depicts a scorpion, a vulture, and a headless human figure in high relief. It occupies the same excavated space as the skull cult evidence. Both are documented in peer-reviewed publications. Neither has a formally agreed interpretation. But here is what they didn't tell you about the scope of what remains unexamined. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the German Archaeological Institute across 4 field seasons, 2003, 2006, 2007, and 2012, confirmed a minimum of 20 enclosures within the Göbekli Tepe mound. Klaus Schmidt noted in his 2003 field report that the initial geomagnetic survey detected more than 10 large enclosures, with more expected beyond the survey boundary, arriving at the minimum 20 estimate across all rounds combined. As of this recording, 4 enclosures have been fully excavated. In October 2025, updated ground-penetrating radar work published through the TAZ Tepeler project revealed additional monumental circular enclosures and a large building structure not previously detected. Current estimates place the excavated portion of the site at under 10% of its total extent. In September 2025, during active restoration work between structures B and D, a life-sized human statue was recovered from inside the base of a wall, deliberately embedded horizontally in the wall structure itself, and not found in open fill. Archaeology magazine reported that Turkish Minister of Culture, Mehmet Nuri Ersoy, described it as a votive offering incorporated into the sacred architecture. It is the first life-sized human statue recovered at Göbekli Tepe specifically. Its formal function has not been determined. In 2023, excavations at Göbekli Tepe recovered a life-sized wild boar sculpture. Pigment analysis confirmed preserved residues of red, white, and black paint on the surface. It is among the oldest painted sculptural objects in the documented archaeological record. This is what the site contains. Most of it is still in the ground. Here is where the pattern gets impossible to ignore. Around 8000 BCE, construction and use of Göbekli Tepe ended. What happened to the site afterward is not ambiguous in the physical record. It is the explanation for what happened that has never been formally agreed upon. Göbekli Tepe sits on an exposed hilltop. Sediment does not naturally accumulate on hilltops. Erosion removes it. The fill that covers every excavated enclosure was imported. Schmidt's excavations documented this in material detail. Millions of pieces of limestone rubble mixed with animal bone deposits and broken flint tools were layered in a composition that stratigraphic and chemical analysis confirmed was not natural geological deposition. It was brought in from elsewhere and deliberately packed until the pillars were covered and the enclosures sealed. Schmidt published his conclusion in peer-reviewed form. The burial was intentional, carried out by the same population that built and used the site. Schmidt tied this observation to the broader cultural context of the period. The abandonment of Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BCE coincides with the time when farming was becoming established in the same region of southeastern Turkey. It is possible that a fundamental shift in social organization, from mobile hunter-gatherer bands to sedentary agricultural communities, created a rupture with the older ritual world the site represented. The wild, predatory spirit figures on the pillars may have belonged to a worldview that farming culture actively moved away from. In this reading, the burial was not preservation, it was erasure. But that interpretation is also not formally resolved in the peer-reviewed literature. Dr. Lee Clare, who took over excavations following Schmidt's death in 2014, published analysis raising questions about the single-event ritual burial model. Clare pointed to evidence of retaining wall construction sequences within the fill, suggesting the process may have been drawn out over time, a response to ongoing structural deterioration rather than one ceremony. In Clare's interpretation, the burial is a protracted abandonment, not a grand closing act. But Clare's model also does not account for the consistent presence of deliberately placed artifact material distributed throughout the fill. Passive abandonment does not produce that kind of deliberate composition. As of the research for this video, no peer-reviewed paper formally reconciles the physical evidence of the fill with a single agreed explanation for why the burial happened when it did, and in the form it took. 30 years after excavation began, the burial is the most physically dramatic and least formally resolved event in the Göbekli Tepe record. One final piece of evidence belongs in this picture. Schmidt's broader thesis, published in peer-reviewed form and now the dominant alternative model in Neolithic studies, holds that organized collective religion may have preceded and driven the agricultural revolution rather than following from it. The standard model says, farming creates civilization. Schmidt's evidence from Göbekli Tepe proposes that the organizational demands of building and sustaining a site of this scale created the pressure to develop agriculture, specifically the need to feed large seasonal gatherings across multiple construction generations. Genetic studies on corn wheat domestication place the first confirmed cultivation of that crop in this exact geographic region of southeastern Turkey, within a few centuries of Göbekli Tepe's peak construction phases. The timing is in the published genetic literature. The causal relationship is still being argued, What is in the peer-reviewed record, taken together, is a construction date of 9,600 BCE, built by a population without agriculture or metal, pillar logistics that exceed the demonstrated capability of the contemporary tool inventory at this scale and duration. A peer-reviewed skull cult in the fill of the excavated enclosures, a deliberate burial whose motivation has never been formally agreed upon, and over 90% of the site's physical extent still unexcavated. That is Göbekli Tepe, not mythology, not alternative history. These are the primary sources of the excavators who dug it. In the next video, we go to the Longyu Caves, a network of hand-carved chambers in eastern China covering 30,000 square meters, with no record of their construction in 2,000 years of Chinese historical documentation. Same methodology. Named excavators. Primary sources only. No speculation. If you are still here, subscribe. This is what the Erased Archive investigates.